Thank you for the introduction, baby Yum Yum. Hello to all the parents and the aspiring parents out there. My name is Deborah Langley and I'm a pharmacist and also the operations and training manager for Supreme Fertility. And today I'm going to be sharing a little bit more with you about a new approach to reducing miscarriages, birth defects, and even increasing IVF success rates. To introduce the topic, I just wanted to share a story of how a pharmacist actually got involved with Supreme Fertility. And it was started off in 2010. It was the 29th of January in 2010 to be exact. And I remember I was lying on my back staring up at the flickering lights on a trolley, and they were about to wheel me into the operations theatre. I was about to give birth to my third daughter. And things had gone wrong. I had no amniotic fluid, so I was expecting something bad. But as they brought my little baby to me, she was wrapped in a standard blue and white hospital towel. And I opened the towel. I knew that she wouldn't live for very long because Kia was born with an extremely rare condition called serine amelia. So from the belly button down, she had no legs. They were fused together into a tail, just like that of a mermaid. And it is extremely rare. It only affects about 1 in 100,000 births. So why me? And I really looked for answers and I searched for answers, and I didn't really find anything. And it was about a few years ago, I was locuming in a pharmacy and everybody was talking about these DNA tests that they had done. And of course, this intrigued me. And I thought, what a fantastic service to offer my own patients to help improve their health and wellness. And that's exactly what I did. I had my DNA tested and it really revealed some interesting facts and things to me, which I'm going to cover a little bit later in my talk this morning. So to kick off, what is infertility and does it only affect first-time parents? Because that's not the case. Sometimes you might have had your first baby and you can really only pick up these problems when you're trying for your second, or even in my case, it was my third pregnancy where I picked up these troubles. So if you have been struggling for more than 12 months of regular unprotected sexual intercourse, you could be classified by the World Health Organization as being infertile. And the older you get, the shorter this window becomes. If you're older than 35, we can reduce this period to 6 months, and older than 39, even 3 months. And it is very, very common, a lot more common than you may think. There's about 1 in 6 couples that are having either problems falling pregnant, keeping the pregnancy, or having miscarriages along the way, or having babies with complications and birth defects, etc. And we don't really hear about it too often because it is quite a private and a sensitive matter. So a third of the time there could be small issues with a man, and a third of the time with a woman, and a third of the time there's small issues with both of you that need to be addressed. And it all starts off with healthy egg and sperm. So when men hit puberty, they produce about 50 to 60,000 sperm per minute. And to be able to conceive, you've got to have a healthy sperm count, healthy shaped sperm, as well as a healthy sperm motility. And the quality of the eggs is just as important. And I really love the analogy of a gumball machine. We can all relate to this. You buy it, it's jam-packed full of sweet, chewy, tasty gumballs, and everybody wants to eat them. But if you leave it in your pantry for a few months and there's only 2 or 3 gumballs left, they're usually hard, dry, and stale, and no one wants them anymore. And that's exactly like a woman's eggs. We are born with all the eggs we'll ever have, and at birth we could have about 2 million of these eggs, but as we age the number drastically decreases until there are no eggs left round about the time when women enter menopause, which could be anywhere from the age of round about 45 years old. So we did speak about the sperm quality, but egg quality is just as important. And what we mean by egg quality is, can the egg actually become a viable pregnancy once it has been fertilized by the sperm? And this usually happens about 30% of the time. So often women can have these little miscarriages all the time without even knowing that they are even pregnant. So from the moment that egg and the sperm join together and fertilization takes place, the cells start dividing. And this is a very, very intricate process. It requires an enormous amount of energy that is produced in the mitochondria in the form of ATP, which is energy that your body produces. Now, there are various factors in our diet and in our lifestyle, as well as a patient's age and their genetic makeup, etc., that could affect any one of these delicate stages of cell division process. So sometimes it's not a problem with the egg and the sperm actually fertilizing. There could be factors affecting one of these delicate stages of cell division as well taking place. So besides these various factors, having the right number and the right copy of chromosomes in the egg and the sperm is critical. So if you look at, on average, women older than 40 years old, about 50 to 80% of their eggs could have some kind of chromosomal abnormality. And it's not only the older women younger than 35, about 1 in 4 of their eggs could have some kind of chromosomal abnormality. So on a particular month, you could ovulate this egg that has chromosomal abnormality. It could be fertilized by the sperm, but this could result in miscarriages, babies with Downs, trisomy, etc. So if you have an egg or a sperm that has chromosomal damage, that little embryo that results after fertilization could have chromosomal damage. And this can result in the complications and the miscarriages, as we already spoke about. Now, if you are planning to have an IVF procedure, there are some really smart fertility clinics and things out there that can do what they call pre-implantation genetic screening on these little embryos and select the ones that are chromosomally normal and implant these back into a woman's uterus. And this will drastically help to improve the success rates considerably. So what we do at Supreme Fertility is we don't really look at the DNA of the egg and the sperm at all. It is now possible to look at the DNA makeup of the mom and the dad to identify potential genetic risk factors that could be increasing risk of damage to the egg and the sperm, risk of miscarriages, etc. So once we've identified those miscarriages, you can actually put steps in place to help reduce the risk of things like that happening. Okay, so we do know when you're looking at things like an IVF procedure, it could be very, very costly. I know it can cost patients up to 90,000 Rand a treatment. And I've already seen patients sometimes needing 4 or 5, sometimes 6 IVF procedures before it is successful. And now we know it takes good quality egg and sperm, so it doesn't help going for an IVF procedure and they're retrieving eggs and sperm that have this chromosomal damage because it's not likely to be successful. And on average, the success rates are only about 32.5% on usually. Okay, so there is now something else that you can do about it, and you can try, and we usually recommend putting these natural steps in place before you even decide to go for something like an IVF or an assisted reproductive procedure, because it will help to improve the quality of your egg and your sperm and increase the success rates of these procedures as well. So what are these tests that are available look at? They actually look at the DNA, and they look for something called SNPs, which is short for single nucleotide polymorphisms. So if a patient, for instance, should have, as an example, a G and a C, these are all amino acids to help produce certain hormones at a certain time of the month, they could have different letters there. And those single letter changes could mean one couple could be really fertile and have a baby super easily, and another struggles for a long time. So we can't really change the genetic makeup. So if we find genes that are poor or healthy for that matter, we can't do anything about it, because the DNA that you have is the DNA that you have for the rest of your life. But what we can change is the epigenetic environment that we put these genes into, and that is made up of your diet, your lifestyle, drugs and supplements that you are using, etc. So that we can change, and by optimizing that whole environment, we can help you become more fertile. And in other instances, you might have really good DNA, but if that environment is not favorable, you could struggle to have a baby. So another interesting thing that we could discover by taking a look at a patient's DNA is that food is made up a whole lot of nutrients, and proper functioning of your DNA is dependent on a lot of these essential nutrients that function as what we call cofactors. And sometimes a patient's DNA can also affect how you absorb certain nutrients from the food that you are eating. So we could give two patients exactly the same food to eat, and one might become nutrient deficient, for instance, and the other one not. And that could also boil down to your genetic makeup. So the DNA, we usually recommend that patients clean up their whole environment for at least 3 to 6 months before even considering IVF procedures or planning a baby, because it does take about 90 days for an egg to reach full maturity and about 72 days for the sperm. So in that critical window of time, it is critical to keep the environment completely clean. It doesn't help using supplements and eating correctly and avoiding toxins, etc., for 3 weeks or a month, and then you go off to a family celebration over the weekend, overindulge in junk food, you have too much alcohol, you're exposed to cigarette smoke, dry food, etc. And the egg or the sperm, the DNA, could be damaged right before ovulation. So it's completely important to keep everything clean and optimal for that entire period of time. So what kind of things would a DNA test like this entail, or what would you look at? Well, we really look at DNA that involves that's involved in things like blood clotting, thyroid health, general fertility, which is things like implantation issues, endometriosis, PCOS, which is another common factor that could be affecting somebody's chances of having a baby, stress, nutrient levels, things like iron, vitamin D, calcium, omega-3 and 6, as well as more intricate processes, something we call methylation, hormone balance, and detoxification. So how you detoxify is very, very important when it comes to fertility. So what I discovered when I had a look at my genetic makeup is that I have two unique genes. One's called the SHMT and the other one's called the MTHFR gene, that were high-risk genes. So I'd inherited both incorrect genes from my parents. And those two particular genes have a role in how your body converts folic acid into the active biological form that the body can use. So having these two genetic variants like I had, I was unable to compare to metabolize enough folic acid, which is known to increase things like neural tube defects, things like that as well. Okay, so when you also need this biologically active folate that we spoke about to help your body convert vitamin B12 into the biologically active form that you can use as well. So if there is not enough of this active folate, you can't actively convert this B12 efficiently, and there could be a rise of a substance called homocysteine in your blood. And there's a lot of research and studies about that and how it affects infertility, etc. And what we've spoken about now is that folic acid cycle. It forms a part of a much bigger picture called methylation. I'm not going to get too scientific yet today, but if there are problems, and we look at and test various genes in this particular pathway, but if there are problems in the methylation pathway, in a man, it has been linked to reduced sperm motility problems with damage to the sperm DNA, these abnormal sperm shapes that you also find as well. And in women, we found problems in the methylation pathways to be linked to things like endometriosis, to PCOS, reduced follicle quality, birth defects, and even these early recurrent pregnancy losses that happen over and over again. So we did mention this high homocysteine, but what have studies shown that things could be linked to having high homocysteine levels? And some common things like ovulation problems, poor egg quality, even poor embryo quality after fertilization, lots of birth defects. So you're looking at things like spina bifida, even club feet, low birth weight babies, preeclampsia during pregnancy, premature birth, things like congenital heart disease, miscarriages, placental abruption that can happen during pregnancy, and even low sperm motility, and PCOS is another factor. Okay, so by taking a look at these genetic variables that we may find, we can support them. So by optimizing, what we really want to do is identify potential risk factors in the patient's diet, their lifestyle, and their genetic makeup, and reduce these risk factors. But at the same time, optimize the nutrients required to support all these abnormal and variant genes. And you can do that through dietary changes, lifestyle changes, avoiding certain drugs and toxins, etc., but also through supplementation. So another critical area that we do look at is hormones, and we know just how important that is for fertility as well. And there are a lot of genes that can also affect how your body not only metabolizes these hormones, but how it breaks them down and gets rid of them as well. Probably one of the last things I quickly want to mention is detoxification, a very important process. We are exposed to many toxins on a daily basis, from things like caffeine, alcohol, cigarette smoke, really bad junk food, etc. And these have to move through a process of detoxification, two parts in your liver, where it becomes water soluble and it gets excreted. Now, there are a lot of genes that have a role to play in this detoxification pathway. And if there are any genetic variants, a patient is likely to be unable to get rid of these toxins very effectively, and they could build up in the body. Not ideal. It can increase inflammation, increase a patient's risk to certain chronic diseases, but there is also a buildup of free radicals and reactive oxygen species in this process, and this can directly damage the DNA of the egg and the sperm directly. So it is now also possible to look at genes that have a role in the body's natural ability to protect itself against this oxidative stress that happens. And we can also put steps in place to support that as well through optimal supplementation, but also looking at other dietary and lifestyle factors that could be also increasing risk of oxidative stress, etc. in the body. So doing little DNA tests like this, if you are squeamish, there's no need to be fearful or anything like that. It's a very simple process. They actually collect DNA from inside your cheek. It's what we call a buccal swab, and it literally takes a minute to do that. And then the swabs get sent off to the labs for analysis, which usually takes a few weeks before the results come back for analysis and for reporting, etc. What's also often that I just want to mention when it comes to miscarriages and even birth defects and things like that, couples are always assume that it's just the woman that has to make the dietary changes and clean up her lifestyle and use supplements, etc. But men are exposed to many different factors as well on a daily basis. From their work environment, they could be exposed to pesticides, junk food, they could be smoking, alcohol, and there's numerous others that we also take a look at. And all these factors can also damage the quality of the sperm. So it may be these abnormal sperm with chromosomal abnormalities, etc., that could be resulting in the miscarriages as such as well. So in a nutshell, there is something you can do to improve the quality of your egg and your sperm before you even decide to try and have a baby, and before you book and you make that expensive decision to go for IVFs and artificial sperm injections and things like that. So we do have a stand as well. So if you want any more questions or you'd like to ask me any questions, please do visit our stand. And so just to sum everything up, your genetic risk factors, there are dietary and lifestyle risk factors, drugs that you are using, pesticides, various other factors in your environment can all affect the quality and of the DNA of your egg and your sperm that could ultimately be affecting your chance of having miscarriages and even babies with birth defects and complications, etc. So thanks again, Baby Young Mum, for having me this morning. It was lovely to be here, and I'm looking forward to fielding all the questions from the parents and aspiring parents out there.